2006 through 2013 BMW X5 E70 electric water pump and thermostat replacement. I'm Brian Esser from How to Automotive. I'm going to walk you through the steps of replacing those. I'm going to get started by getting the vehicle up in the air. If you're doing this at home, you're going to need to use floor jacks and jack stands and get the front of the vehicle up as high as you possibly can. So once you got the vehicle up in the air, the first step is going to be to remove the under splash shields. They're held on with Phillips screws, and so you'll follow around the perimeter of the shield, removing the screws. And to remove the screws, you'll turn a quarter turn counterclockwise, and that's all you need to do. They don't actually screw all the way out. After removing the splash shields, the next we need to remove the skid plate, which is held on with 16mm bolts. So you're just going to follow around the perimeter and remove the bolts and lower the shield down. To make quick work of that, I'm going to use my Milwaukee M18 Fuel 3/8 drive impact wrench here. This has been one of the best investments I've made in a long time. So looking up on the passenger side of the vehicle, just in front of the radiator, is the water pump and the thermostat. The water pump is electric on this vehicle. And the first step we're going to do is remove the lower hose here. You're going to need a hook tool like this. And what we're going to do is you're going to hook it into the clip that's on the quick disconnect clip here. And you're going to pop that clip up and out. Now that you got the clip popped up, what you're going to do is you're going to use your hands and wiggle the hose and pull the hose off. You're going to want to have a bucket underneath to catch the coolant as it comes out. And you're also going to be prepared to jump out of the way because it will rain coolant down on you. You can also use a flat blade screwdriver or a little small pry bar and pry right here against the thermostat housing and the hose and pry the hose off. So once you get the hose popped off, it's going to start draining out like this. Once most of the coolant has drained out, I just pushed the hose all the way off and tucked it behind the sway bar here. Now we need to remove the smaller hose here, and you're going to use your pick tool again to pick out the quick disconnect clip. So you'll pull the clip or hook it in the clip and then pull the clip off. So once you get the clip popped up, the next is you're going to just wiggle the hose off your hand or use the screwdriver or pry bar to pop it off. And then once you get that popped off, you can tuck it behind the sway bar also. Now there's one more smaller hose just above the one we just took off right here with the hose clamp. If you can see it here, we need to remove that hose clamp and pop that hose off. So you can use a little small stubby flat blade screwdriver like this, or what I'm going to use is this flexible nut driver here. And you kind of just angle it up there and put it onto the hose clamp like this and loosen up the hose clamp. If you can't get to it this way, you can actually get to the hose clamp also from the back side. If you look just above the differential here, you can get to your nut driver or screwdriver or whatever onto the hose clamp and loosen it up and go ahead and push that hose off. Once you get that hose pushed off, you can just push it over to the side. So once you got that hose popped off, you're going to go around the back side looking above the differential here. And if you look at this big hose, it wraps around from the thermostat to the back of the water pump. We need to remove the hose clamp here at the back of the water pump and pop the hose off at the back. So to do that, I'm going to use a long skinny flat blade screwdriver and come through the hole on the right side of the subframe here and loosen up the hose clamp. Then I'll just pull the hose off like this. Every time I pull a hose off, a little bit more coolant drains. So now I'm going back around to the front of the thermostat here, and I'm going to pull the electrical connector off. What I'm going to do to get that connector off is use a little pick tool and pry the little tab back and then pull the electrical connector out. After that's disconnected, I'm going to remove the two 10mm bolts here that go through the water pump and mount onto the thermostat housing. Remove those two bolts, then I'm going to pull the thermostat housing down, and you kind of angle it past the sway bar here and pull it through the subframe right here in the front. And it takes a little bit of twisting and stuff to get it to come out. I also reach around the back where the hose is still connected to the thermostat housing and help push it through and help guide it through as I'm pulling the thermostat through towards the front of the vehicle out down below the sway bar. And like I said, it takes a little twisting to get it to come out. Now looking above the differential, you can see the water pump here. We need to disconnect the electrical connector, so you'll squeeze the tab and pull the main connector off like this. And you just kind of tuck it out of your way for now. Just to the right of the electrical connector is another hose clamp. We need to loosen that up. And it's hooked to a metal pipe that goes up to the block right here. We need to remove the two screws to hold the metal pipe on also. And to do that, I'm going to use a wobbly socket and a E8 female torque socket like this. I also have about a 2-foot long extension. So coming from the side, just behind the rack and pinion and just to the right of the axle, there's a hole. So I'll feed the extension and wobbly socket up through the hole and go up towards the pipe. And looking up above the differential, you can see the pipe. So I'll pan back here so you can see what I'm going through. So the extension and wobbly socket feeds through the side of the suspension and up towards the pipe here that I'm looking up just above the differential. So you can get the wobble socket right onto the torque bolts and remove the two bolts. Once you get the two bolts removed, you can wiggle the hose and pop the hose off completely. So once you get that hose disconnected, you can just push it back and leave it in the car. There's another hose connected to it that we're not going to take off. Now we're ready to remove the bolts for the water pump, but first we need to pop this little wire loom bracket here. It's kind of blocking one of the bolts. It's just a little clip that holds the wire loom, so you need to pull that off. You can use a flat blade screwdriver or just your fingers like I did there and pull that off. That way you have access to the bolt. So you're going to need an E12 female torque socket like this and about a 2-inch extension. Now I'm going to go ahead and take off the top bolt of the water pump first. There's only 3 bolts holding it on, so I'm going to put it on there. It's just on the top side. I can see it, but with the camera it's a little hard to see. Or you may be able to reach up there and feel it. So you're going to put your socket on there and crack it free and spin the bolt out. After removing the top bolt, we can get these 2 bottom bolts. The inner bolt is a little hard to get to. So you can take the 10mm bolt right here in view, loosen that up and push the hose out of your way, or you can do what I'm doing is use a E12 torque wrench here. So go ahead and remove the 2 bottom bolts. Once you get the 2 bottom bolts removed, then you can take the water pump and push it back towards the differential. So you're going to push it back towards the back of the car. And what we're going to do is we're going to come over here on the side of the skirt here and remove this plastic shield here that's held on by a couple of 8mm screws and a couple of little clips. So we're going to remove the fasteners here, and then on the opposite side by the rack and pinion over here, it goes over the rack and pinion over the axle. So once you get the fasteners removed from here, just here, and here, just above the axle here is going to be a plastic little 10mm nut we're going to remove. Then you can go ahead and remove the cover. Then after that, we want to turn the wheels fully to the left. With the wheel fully turned to the left, now you can grab the pump over here and push it through the hole where you just created from removing that cover on the side of the suspension here. And then you can twist and pull the water pump out of the car right here, just below the lower control arm right here. It takes a little twisting and finessing to get it out, but it will come out. So here's the water pump and part numbers I'm going to be using on this vehicle. I'll link these up in the description of the video. We're also going to replace the thermostat and also the bolts that hold the water pump in. They're one-time use only. So now we're going to take the water pump here and feed it back through the lower control arm and then angle it back left and towards the driver's side of the car. And when you go in, you want to make sure that the hoses sides are down like this, and then you'll rotate it towards the left, which means the pump will be rotating in towards the engine block. And then once you get it in there, you kind of go over the differential and twist it towards the front of the car. So and I'm also pulling from this side of the frame, and you kind of twist it left, right, and kind of angle it to kind of guide it and to go through. As you're feeding the water pump back into position, you want to make sure that you keep in mind the top only has 1 mount and the bottom of the water pump has 2 mounts. So when you feed it in, you make sure you keep that in mind as you rotate it into the engine bay. So once you got the water pump pulled through, go ahead and line it up with the 3 mounting holes. And what we're going to do is we're going to install brand new mounting bolts. They're designed to be one-time use only. So we're going to thread these bolts into the water pump and into position. And we're going to run them in until they're all snug, not tight or anything. Just run them until they're snug. Then I'll walk you through the torquing procedure. So after running them in until they're snug, you can torque them all down to 8 foot-pounds. So now I took a paint marker and marked one of the ears on the bolt here. And what we're going to do is we're going to rotate that bolt 90 degrees. So I'm going to use the little paint mark as a reference mark, and I'm going to rotate it clockwise until it's over here on this side. So I'm going to do that with a breaker bar. So I rotated the bolt with my wrench, or my extension until the bolt paint mark is 90 degrees from where we started. You're going to do that for all three. After that, we're going to reinstall the pipe here that was bolted up to the engine block and mounted onto the water pump. The pipe has an O-ring that seals into the engine block. So the way I reinstalled it was reach the side of the hole where we created where we got the water pump out, and then you can look up towards the engine block and you can see what you're doing to push it into the side of the engine block. And then once you got that on there, then you can go ahead and push the hose onto the water pump and start the hose clamp there at the bottom. Now that the hose and clamp is re-secured to the water pump and the pipe is fed into the block, the next step we're going to do is take a little bit of blue thread locker and put it on the threads of the bolts that held the pipe into the side of the engine block. This is a little glue to help prevent the bolts from vibrating loose. Then I took a piece of paper, stuffed it in the socket, and stuffed the bolt into the socket. That way it won't fall out, and I can use it to feed through the hole on the side here. And looking up to above the differential, you can see exactly what you're doing to help guide the screws and the extension back into place. After tightening the two bolts, the next step is going to be to plug the electrical connector back in for the water pump. Now we're going to take our new thermostat and lay it side by side with our old one and transfer over the hose here straight over to the new thermostat and make sure they're at the same angles and everything that the original ones were. So now feeding the thermostat housing back in there with the bolt holes facing down towards you like this. We'll feed it back up past the sway bar here, and then once we got it into position, before starting the bolts here in the front, what I do is I reach around the back here, and I go ahead and put the hose on to the water pump, and put the hose clamp on and tighten that clamp up. Now you can install the two bolts for the thermostat and tighten those up. Plug in the electrical connector for the temp sensor here, and then once you got that plugged in, the little metal bracket that held the wire loom, you can go ahead and plug that onto the top of the water pump. So after resecuring the bolts and the electrical connector for the thermostat here, I'm going to go up and plug the hose here on the top, the highest port here that had the hose clamp. Go ahead and put that hose back on and tighten that hose clamp down. Now we're going to install the vent hose here, and you're going to make sure the metal clip is pushed back into the grooves and fully seated in there. And when you go to push this hose on, that clip will flare open around a little tab on the thermostat housing and then pop back into place and lock to the thermostat. So you're going to line up the thermostat with the hose, and you're going to push it on until you hear those little spring clips click over the lips, and then give it a little tug to make sure it won't pop back off. Then you're going to make sure the lower hose here has its clip back into position. Then you'll line it up with the thermostat and push the hose onto the thermostat. And it takes a little pressure when you're pushing these hoses on, and you're going to listen for that click. And once you hear it click, then you're going to pull it and make sure that hose does not pop back off. So you're going to double check that those clips are in place. Once that's secured, then you can go ahead and put this little plastic cover on the side here with the 4 mounting screws, with the 4 8mm screws and the 1 10mm plastic nut. Go ahead and feed that back into place and start the bolts. Then after that, you can put the skid plate here with the 16mm bolts and go ahead and tighten those back up. Once again, to make quick work of that, I'm using my Milwaukee impact gun here. I'll link this up in the description of the video. This has been one of those tools that's been very helpful for me. Now we're ready to reinstall the lower splash shield with the Phillips screws around the perimeter. Now with the vehicle back down on the ground, we need to fill it up with BMW approved 50/50 mixed coolant. You're going to fill it up until the top right here. It has this little indicator here that says max. You're going to fill it up all the way to the very top of that. Before we start the car, we're going to hook up a scan tool, go into BMW specific, and clear any of the codes that may have been in there. After that, I'm going to start the vehicle and let it run, and then check the coolant. If it needs topping off, I'll fill it up to just to that mark on the inside of the bottle. Don't overfill the bottle. And after you get that, that'll complete the job of replacing the water pump on a BMW X5. I'm Brian Nessa from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos. Encourage you to subscribe. Invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website. And also to remind you, I'll link up all the parts and tools in the description of the video. Thank you again for watching.